perfect. Now it's working. Okay, so in this short time that I have at my disposal, I will try to present whether it is possible to build a socially smart community of users in times of uneven urban development. I will base my case on the post-industrial transformation of an old tobacco factory in Ljubljana. And I will start with a short introduction where I will try to explain why even talk about socially smart communities. And of course, the debate commences with the smart city debate. And in these terms, I will try to explain first the genealogy of the smart cities movement, which gained so much steam in the last period. So why did it get so much steam? I think that the smart city conceptualization found themselves in a specific context where this increasing complexity and uncertainty of present societies provided some kind of impetus for them to become a really important factor in this sense. And here are just two books which are typical representations which show this increasing complexity and uncertainty of present societies. One is by Zygmunt Bauman and the other one is by Ulrich Beck, Risk Society. And I believe you know all these books, but these are classical examples of books which try to point in the direction of how unstable are the present societies in terms of problems which may occur due to various complexities that are present inside. And in these circumstances where instabilities in dynamic environments prevent more effective use of classical analytical methods, the smart city concept, of course, seems an adequate tool that would, through the enhanced use of technology and digital infrastructures, allow to gather first-hand information and data from actual living environments. Of course, this is just the idea that the smart city can provide the right type of data, because the reality is a little bit different. So the first concept of smart city were prevalently oriented on technical aspects of data accumulation, which were tied to sensor technology. And these are classical examples like MIT Space Lab, UC Urban Labs, Nokia Lab, Philips Home Lab, and other which are part of the history of this movement, if I may call it so. So in order to fully exploit the value of data that are gathered on the basis of these smart city infrastructures, the smart city concept by definition had to combine with community aspects. Because providing data is not enough. You have to have some community aspects to at least make sense of them. So the Living Lab conceptualization was supposed to bridge this gap between smart cities and smart communities. So the application of Living Lab methodologies. And what is a Living Lab methodology? In fact, it's so difficult to define it. Of course, it's user-centered. It's open innovation system. It's operating in a territorial context. It's integrated concurrent research and innovation processes. There are so many definitions of it, but the majority of them try to provide a systemic user co-creation approach, integrating research and innovation processes. And by experimenting and evaluating, providing different innovative ideas, scenarios, in different real-life use cases. So such use of cases involves user communities not only as observed subjects, but also as a source of creation. This is kind of an essence of the Living Labs. It's supposed to be the essence. But the question which arises from these definitions is, up to which point does the research process indeed identify and integrate the real needs of observed subjects, if I may call them so? Because I believe there are a lot of limitations to present Living Lab users. And although the discourse surrounding Living Lab methods tries to emphasize its differentiations from test-bed philosophy, where users are being traditionally considered as observed subject for test and module, it is impossible to evade specific limitations to the present Living Lab users. And these limitations are found in Living Lab methodology that is prevalently present in product-based laboratories and mainly focuses on manufacturing of end products like service development processes, and less on analysis of social dynamics of everyday life. And this is the problem which I see in present Living Lab users. So, in fact, the present Living Lab users try to, well, not try, but to a certain extent evade adequate integration of social dynamics of everyday life. And they, in fact, evade more precise definition regarding minimum standards, requirements, or place-based needs of test subject in specific context. So this ambiguity of data refers to their limited usability due to questionable analytical immersion or embeddedness of living labs within the social context. So regarding the type, quality, and consequently analysis of data greatly differ in relation to location, durability of research process, historic context, and other micro social spatial parameters that constitute the uniqueness of place. So living labs, in this regard, often try to employ specific standardization techniques that would simplify the research procedure, but at the same time obscure small parts of information which are crucial to explain the studied phenomena. So it is all about how to identify deficits in present use of living labs. It's like the iceberg principle, where you on the surface, you just scratch the surface. You see the surface of the study problem, but underneath there is a whole iceberg of problems, of tacit knowledges, of hidden data, which are not seen through if you don't imply or combine specific methods and try to see the problem from various angles. And this is the problem inside, which I see inside these methods. And there are some numerous cases where I see that. I've been studying cases all over from Europe to Asia, practically all over the world. I see the same problems when I bump into smart cities connected to living lab technologies. And these problems can be seen on various levels, on various dimensions. They can be seen on the dimension of time, on the duration of space and people, in regard to time. So how long is the duration of the living lab? Is it 1 year? Is it 5 years? How many years? So in regard to the space, which spaces are included? How big is the area? Does it include one complex? Does it include the whole city? What is the scale? And then the people, how to build a representative heterogeneous sample that you don't have just a specific, quite homogeneous groups inside. These are all problems which are associated with this. And the biggest, let's say, question represent this unexpected and unwanted possible consequence of social actions that stem from it. So this D section is the most problematic, let's say, or most questionable aspect of these actions, social actions, which come and are difficult to grasp. They're difficult to grab, and because they are unexpected and unwanted, and they are always present. This D category is always present, at least to a certain extent. So, how smart is too smart? I could use so many examples. I just chose two, and this is a typical, how to say, problems into which you bump when you try to analyze various cases of living labs. So, planning for socially smart communities. Should we plan? How much planning? Is it even possible to plan? These are big questions. And even defining a socially smart community is difficult. Of course, it has to have the elements of organic, semi-spontaneous growth, bottom-up. It has to be sustainable over a period of time. It has to be inclusive. It has to have this participatory aspect. In terms of group social and cultural heterogeneity, it has to preserve or enhance the quality of life for the vast majority of social groups. And of course, a socially smart community may function as an empowered social actor that is able to respond to the contextual conditions to produce actions. I will try to present this problematic, let's say, how to do it on two cases. I will approach the UEL case through another case from Tromsø. So I will try to present briefly the Tromsø experiment of fluid spatial planning, just to go into the direction where I want to go with the UEL, with the description of UEL project. So what is the Tromsø experiment? What did it do? It lasted for 1 year, and during this year, the participatory aspects of the stakeholders which were included in this process were really open. What do I mean? Each stakeholder who was included in this process had the same voice. So an ordinary person from a community had the same voice as an urban planner in terms of power. So you can imagine how experimental was this at this stage. So this is why it lasted just for 1 year. And in this 1 year period, not a lot of things were done, but it still opened specific dilemmas and specific communicative aspects which were unseen before. And what happened? This experiment, in fact, triggered extreme invigoration of spatial planning processes. And during the duration of the experiment, spatial planning professionals were forced to learn to communicate with others and adjust the rhetoric to other stakeholder groups. So they had to synchronize regarding specific spatial changes in the cities. And this, of course, diminished the influence of professional jargon and complex technical representations. It also enabled the establishment of new communication channels among stakeholders. And these communication channels, which durated for 1 year, were prolongated to 2 years after the project was already over. So in this term, the project helped in developing legitimacy and empowerment of social groups and social media. So the Tromsø experiment has, despite encountering difficulties in direct improvement of traditional planning solutions, so no big projects were built, but it discovered the blind spot in the flow of information between stakeholders and enabled a new discursive field based on mutual experiential learning, where users were immersed in a creative social space for designing and experiencing their own future. I believe this blind spot of communication process can be found also inside the UEL project. We have 4 research teams. Each city tries to find this blind spot in its own way. Each has a different approach. And in this sense, I will talk just about the approach of Ljubljana. I will just try to show how we try to find this blind spot in the case of tobacco factory in Ljubljana. Tobacco factory of Ljubljana is quite an interesting project because it has a long history as a tobacco factory, of course. Here are some slides which show the 18th century history of the area, and voila. And here is for example, here are how the work used to look like in the tobacco factory in the old times. But the tobacco factory definitely changed. This is the new reality of the tobacco factory. So it is a cultural hub, it is an amusement hub, it is a creative economies hub. It has many functions and is a gathering place for many groups, very popular, and also has a lot of co-working spaces, and all sorts of things are going on in this location. At the same time, it is the biggest concentration of small and medium enterprises or creative economies, which are still just coming to the. These are not big firms. These are really small actors, which are trying to thrive in this area. And here is shown on the regional level how big is the concentration in the Ljubljana, and here is on the level of the city where it's shown how the area is so important, let's say, in terms of the concentration of creative economies. And here is the tobacco factory located. But of course, nothing lasts long, and the tobacco factory is in the process of being sold to an investor, which will try to change the area, and this is how is the area supposed to look after the transformation. It's a complete transformation of the area, and what we're trying to do in the case of Ljubljana and in the terms of UEL project, we try to build specific communication channels inside between the actors that already exist in the locations, particularly between the small and medium enterprise, SMEs, and NGOs, and all these cultural actors that work in the area. And we're trying to do this through applying specific methods. First, by analyzing through deep interviews and participant observation, because a team of researchers, EPOP, which are included in the project, are constantly present on the location and work from the location of tobacco factory. So we're trying to study which are the pluses and minuses of the location, and at the same time try to study the social networks and try to empower these social connections. Basically, we're trying to do this. We are first studying the area, then trying to provide some actions of how to, we try to do some kind of community building, not of course in the sense of social engineering, but in terms of organic building of the community, just providing specific context, specific contextual possibilities for the development of community building of the actors which exist in this location. And after a few years, we will again try to check whether some progress was done. And we're trying to, of course, during this process, during this 3 years period, to produce some kind of experiential learning for the 4 actors, which are, in this case, the university, the in situ affected groups, the former institutional actors, and the local NGOs that exist on these locations. And here are some of the actions that have been already done. The James Walk, which I believe you know, and here are some other actions which were put together, which took various activities, events, and of course we're trying to expand events not only into the area of tobacco factory, but trying to expand them into the wider community that exists around the tobacco factory. And of course, by doing this, creating activity networks and establishing a socially, potentially smart community, if I may so, by identifying actors, by identifying stakeholders in location, by trying to provide meetings of various stakeholders through various activities on location, and creating, or better say, self-establishing organic growth of activity networks between stakeholders that exist in this tobacco location. Will it succeed? I'm not completely sure, because the area is right on the gentrification frontier. And on this slide is shown the various prices of rents in the city of Ljubljana, and the area of tobacco factory is located exactly here, which is on the gentrification frontier. And the gentrification frontier is spreading towards the location, and it will engulf it at a certain point, considering the prices of housing estates and the rents which are going constantly up. So I'm not sure how successful we'll be during this attempt, but at least we are trying to provide specific types of support to the groups which are already existing and, how to say, trying to thrive in this location. So the intent of this process was to change the discourse among stakeholders that would not only trigger the process of communication and empowerment of weaker stakeholders, but also initiate the process of experiential learning and acquiring of accumulating knowledge and cultural capital within groups that were previously excluded from the process. So the groups which exist there, they will try to build their capital in terms of knowledge of how to fight specific forms of uneven urban development, which try to transform a really important place inside of Ljubljana, which is the nucleus, the main ecosystem of smaller creative actors that exist in Ljubljana. So we're trying to enable this transfer of knowledge regarding the possibilities of participation in spatial planning processes to weaker stakeholders. And we try to do this on the basis of experimental pedagogy, which is part of UEL. And of course, it is an attempt to disclose these hidden, obscured, residual elements which are often paid less attention or even not taken into consideration, and in such way socially and politically empower specific types of, at the moment, non-active stakeholders on location, but which are, of course, deeply affected by this uneven urban development, which is showing its intentions through completely homogeneous transformation of the area without any plans for the community, which already is successful and thriving in this location. Okay, this is my part, and thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Matjaž.
Okay.